Welcome to Hospitality Meets with me, Phil Street, where each week we take a light-hearted look into the stories and individuals that make up the wonderful world of hospitality. Today's guest is Mark Fenelon, Chief Executive Officer of the rapidly expanding Clink Hostels. Coming up on today's show, Mark sums up why you should work in hospitality.
The people you meet are brilliant, the crack you have is great.
Phil reveals the new hub of the world. Everyone I know seems to be building something in Lisbon. What's going on in Lisbon? And Mark tells us that there may be some reputation work to be done in the US.
The US is a kind of huge market. Hostels is a dirty word over there.
All that and so much more as Mark talks us through his story and journey to date. I was thrilled to get some time with Mark as he is leading a business that not only is in rapid growth, but is also ensuring that they are having a positive impact on the world. And we talk extensively about that throughout, amongst so many other things. Don't forget, we launch a brand new episode each week telling the amazing and always amusing stories from hospitality. So please remember to like, subscribe and review on whatever platform you're listening. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to the next episode of Hospitality Meets with me, Phil Street. Today's guest hails from a section of the hospitality industry that we've not yet covered, and that is the world of hostels. So I'm delighted to have someone with us who I think it's fair to say doesn't have your typical route to hospitality, but certainly now finds himself at the helm of a company making all the right noises in that space. With properties in London and Amsterdam already with us and ones in Dublin and Lisbon on their way, it gives me great pleasure to welcome the CEO of Clink Hostels, Mark Fenelon.
Many thanks, Phil, for a kind introduction. No, delighted to be on. Thank you very much for having me.
You're very, very
delighted
welcome.
to be able to talk through.
Yeah, am I accurate in terms of where you're at the moment? You've got your two properties here. You've got, London and Amsterdam, and then Dublin and Lisbon on the way.
Yeah. So we've two hostels in London. We've three in Amsterdam. And the Dublin I've started building, so will be I believe, I've been told anyway, the biggest hostel, most modern hostel in Dublin and probably the most central. So we're really excited about that. And then Lisbon, it's going through planning at this stage, and we're kind of keen to look at more opportunities out there. We obviously love the sector. We love the guests in the sector, and we're I guess we're looking to spread the love of Clink a bit further into Europe. Yeah.
I have limited experience of hostels, two very, very different experiences of hostels when from my childhood. I say childhood. One was at the age of 15, 16-ish, and the other one I was 21, 22. The first of which was in Carlisle in the UK, and it was definitely a forgettable experience. And the other experience was in Australia, and that was a completely different experience from the one in the UK. They seem to really, really know what they're doing when it comes to looking after the needs of a traveller.
Yeah. Well, it's I suppose it's actually, you won't be alone in that diverging views. I think nearly everyone I speak to will say, I have a good story and lots of good story. And I think maybe that explains a little bit of where hostels have come from. Obviously, they've been around for 100 odd years and kind of through, I think, scouting origins. But they've kind of gone on a very fast road, I'd say, in the last 7-10 years, whereby, there's so many hostels and they're brilliant. There's big, small, there's kind of family owned, there's people who backpacked and said, hey, I want to set up a hostel. But I think in the last 7-10 years, it's grown, and I think it's been recognized by a lot of hospitality. This is the new budget segment. So it's near like the budget sector splitting down into what I call the ultra budget sector. But with that, you have like the brands of kind of lifestyle brands emerging, like Generator and Selena, who've done a brilliant job in what they do. They're kind of bring a huge amount of design to what they do. They have their own focus and their own unique positioning for their guests. Yeah. So, and I think probably the other big change, Phil, has been obviously low-cost airlines, obviously on a pre-COVID basis. The kind of growth 5-7% every year for probably the last 15-20 years has brought a huge amount of people into affordable travel. And again, the accommodation piece is typically the one that hardest hits. So hostels have nearly been seen not just from a backpacker point of view, but they've probably expanded into people who want a great place to stay, a bit of buzz in it, but at the right price. So it's that combination, and I think that's pushed standards as well. So standards have changed, a huge amount in 7-10 years.
Yeah.
But the supply of kind of well-priced accommodation hasn't, across the board, and hostels are helping fill that gap.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. And as I said at the little spiel that I gave at the beginning, you kind of you haven't always been in hospitality.
No.
You've got quite a diverse background. So take us all the way back to the beginning of your career. How did you end up here?
Yeah. Well, if you go back to begin the career, I tried to keep quiet and a boring old accountant, or I was many years ago. I've shaken off that hopefully now. But I've taken an unusual route to the hostel space, and I guess probably, I've worked in kind of farmer sector, I've worked in software sector, I've ran my own business, and I think probably one of the things that kept on coming back to me, Phil, was in all my jobs, I was doing a huge amount of travel. At one point, I was kind of probably 3 out of 5 years in Asia, around China and Japan, and fascinating places. But people said, well, how the hell are you still doing that? I was a young family at home, and it wasn't just getting away to get a good night's sleep in Asia, but it was basically, I love travel. Just love it. And I think that brought me to the kind of hostel space. I was lucky enough to meet the founders, the Dolan family, and they were looking to do something special with their Clink brand, which is a fabulous kind of hostel setup. It's kind of unique in its focus on the kind of guest experience. But and it just kind of connected with me. I love hospitality. I experienced it from the other side. And I also loved the opportunity I saw with hostels, because I could see the kind of the future of hostels, and the fact that, someone needs to own the ultra budget space, and the hostel model's really well placed. And then probably the people, it's probably the best sector. The people you meet are brilliant. The crack you have is great. And it's just, I think that combination of a passion for travel, but also the people you meet are brilliant. So that kind of brought me in, unusually enough, and I'm still here.
Right. Yeah. Actually, going back to that, my experience of the Australian hostel, the point you make there about them being wonderful places to be, with full of life, was absolutely on point. I mean, they had one kind of major central open plan living space where you dip in and out of there at any time of the day, and there's 10 people in there just chewing the fat. Maybe they're having a beer. Then you end up ordering pizza, or maybe you just decide that, shall we go and learn how to make a pizza together? And from a traveling perspective, when you're out there on your own seeing the world, they're wonderful places to be, just in terms of trying to connect with people and giving yourself some fresh ideas as to what you do with the next day of your life.
Well, Andy, I think you're so right, Phil, because I suppose everything is kind of controlled for us. Leave school, go to college, even travel is controlled. You can do everything on booking.com, Hostel World. I remember backpacking around South America, and it's hard to get a phone, and definitely internet kiosks didn't really exist anywhere, and you had to turn up a place, just knock on the door. Do you have any room? But now you can look at, and that was exciting, because you just the kind of casualness and the kind of just stuff happens. And I think for us, like 50% of our guests are solo travelers. A bit like what you're saying, they either have time off, or they just want to get out and kind of live life a little bit. And I suppose their choice is, do they go to a hotel? Hotels are brilliant, but they're not known for kind of high energy, or being able to sit down and just casually talk to someone, and kind of we're about bringing people and places together. I suppose that's kind of our mission. They can stay in Airbnb, which loads of great selection, but if you're a solo traveler, it's kind of cost prohibitive, and you're on your own again. So I think it's nearly a bit like what I've seen in Japan when I was staying out there for many years. It's kind of, people get isolated, and I think post-COVID, I think relationships will mean even more, to be valued much more. And I think hostels are all about just being open. It's open plan. It's all about events. It's trying to get people to meet each other. I know Selena have a measure they do of how many friends people have met. So really? you can slag it off or not, but it's just but that, I suppose, ultimately about bringing, as I say, people and places together. That's what we're all about.
Yeah.
And it's those experiences and being part of creating a memory for people. Obviously, we can't control that, but it's just, and people have a crack to go a bit wild. They see places they would never see before. They meet people they never would have met before. And I think that's the beauty of travel, which I think with all the technology out there has nearly been lost a little bit.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I remember we spoke a few weeks back about the fact that actually, you guys really do listen to kind of who your target market is, because they're actually also, the predominant ones that travel, which is the people who've got time. It's generally the younger generations that have that before they've kind of settled down and got on with their, getting a job and a family and a house and all of that sort of stuff. But they're also generally the ones that have less disposable income. So you literally are, and I think you might have even said that the percentage wise of travelers in that space is far greater than any other segment.
No, it's a good point, Phil, because you have like kind of 18 to 30s is about, of traveling population, about 35%. But if you look at kind of accommodation that is, be it on a price, on a service, on a kind of events set up for people like that, again, various research has suggested it's only about 7%, 5 to 7%.
Right.
And you, to give a practical example, if you jump on a plane to Dublin, where I'm kind of born and bred, you'll get a cheap Ryanair flight there. Might cost you 20, 25 quid each way if you pick your times right. Well, pre-COVID, the situation you walked into was you've 80% of all beds, so this includes student accommodation, of all beds are 3-star hotel and upwards. And unfortunately, with that comes a massive price tag. So you'd be 127.50, which is the pre-COVID price. Obviously, you get better rates now. But and if you're a solo traveler, you kind of go, screw that. I'm not going to Dublin. I'd love to go to Dublin, but I'm not going to go unless I have a mate I can sleep in the couch. So where we offer something for 25, 28 quid a night, where, you are sharing a room, but you're sharing a room, you can meet people, and it's a cool hostel, has everything you want. And that I think that's, it's not game changer, that's too big a phrase, but it's reasonably unique in the hospitality market, which surprises me being an outsider, where there's just a lack of, there's a mismatch on what a lot of people want, 35% of the population, and what hospitality from a price point are giving them.
Yeah, and I think it certainly at that, again, I can only really call on my own experience here, but at the age that I was traveling, I was about spending as little money as possible on the accommodation element, so I could go and spend the rest of the money on experiencing life, and the like. So
which is a polite way of putting it.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, you kind of learn the phrases over the years, don't you, to use in the appropriate moments. But but yeah, no, it's clear to me that it's really the time is absolutely ripe for what you guys are trying to do.
I and again, from the outsider, could be naive as well, but I suppose I've seen a few different sectors, and I was chatting to a guy who said in the 80s in the UK, everyone poo-pooed budget hotels. They said, look, they'll never happen. There's 3-star, there's not enough market demand for them, and budget hotels now, I think, are about 25% of all hotel stock.
Right.
And obviously back in the 80s, you didn't have cheap flights, so you didn't have people, be it who wanted to spend their money on experiencing life versus on a bed. And now you've 35% of the traveling community are people who are just more budget conscious for various reasons. So, but hospitality would appear not to have caught up. You'd have the likes of Bcorp, where Joe and Joe have introduced a Hostel brand, really good brand. I think they've set up several locations and they're continuing to grow. They see the opportunity there. I think a lot of investment money would see the opportunity in the hostel space, because I suppose investors sometimes look at it in very sterile terms, and they'll say, well, look, you get a lot of money per square foot or square meter because you have bunk beds in instead of a bed in a room. So the kind of money side is good, but it comes back to the experiences. And as you said, Phil, understanding our guests, because I suppose something we've looked at and are beginning to implement is Bcorp. So it's again, if someone said, well, 18 to 30s, how are they done during COVID? And everyone struggled and everyone's had, challenges. But you'd say 18 to 30s are probably one category that have been really affected, along with kind of the elderly, because, I can't get the college experience. It's a virtual experience. I'm living at home. I can't get a job, or I can't get on the right career ladder I want to get on. And, I can't travel. And it's
I can't live.
Really, you can't live. Yeah. And so people are kind of, if you're a bit older, maybe you're further up the career ladder, it definitely hasn't been easy for anyone, but it's just their life's on pause for 2 years. So we kind of, and it was actually on the back of Black Lives Matter, Phil, that got us thinking, because typically we wouldn't have commented on, call it, racism or politics, and Black Lives Matter really woke us up, gave us a right kick up where it counts. And it made us think, well, actually companies do need to stand for something. And look, we're not being angelical saying, we've done it, every company needs to do a 360 on this, but they just have to count for their time here. They can't, it's not just about profit. It's not just about a website which has all the right words in it about, ECG, etc. It's actually doing something that you do count for. So we had a long, hard think, and we came up with this idea of shut up and listen. And it was basically, everyone shut up because no one's listened to 18 to 30 year olds.
Right.
They're kind of the politicians and much older. They're isolated governments, it's just unfortunate. There's a risk, there's a generational gap coming up here. And so we said, what could we do? So we decided to launch a campaign which said, well, if people want to volunteer, if they can travel, of course, which is a challenge, but in their own home cities where we are, if they volunteer, we'll give them a free bed. Simple as that. So we said, we pledge 1,000 beds. So as long as it's a good volunteering event, we'll happily do that. So that kind of started us moving and thinking. And like we've had Extinction Rebellion, we've had 10,000 hours, we've had a kind of volunteer group from Stichting who supported Brazilian, undocumented Brazilian children. And these volunteers need to stay in Amsterdam. So we kind of gave them accommodation. So that's kind of moved into Bcorp, B Corporation, which was, again, I guess, formalizing a little bit of what we've been doing. So as in, companies need to count for something. And it was looking around your environmental, what are you giving back to community? And it's not the big stuff. It's not, you have to be doing something every day, every minute, every day, but it's kind of those small steps. If every company does it, then you actually see some decent change.
Yeah.
So we're aiming to be the first hostel to get Bcorp accreditation over the next 12, 18 months. So it's kind of, I think it's not saying, look, profit is bad. It's not saying that, but it's just saying a little bit more balance. And if every company takes that conscious step, then things will get better, because if everyone's taking a few steps. So
yeah, I think this has been on the agenda now it's been increasingly on the agenda over the last couple of years, accentuated, I think, by COVID, because everybody's had this moment in their life to stop and just think about, and whether that's from a business's perspective or an individual's perspective. And, for me, and this has always been the case, a business should exist to make a difference in some way, not just to make pounds and pence and euros and so on and so forth. Obviously, that's important because otherwise there is no business. But if that's the main driver for doing it, my question has always been then the driver's not big enough, because you need a higher purpose. You need something bigger to be looking to achieve, a bigger problem to solve. Maybe that's even just a case of, especially I guess for properties like yours, you're integrating into communities, and you're bringing people into communities. So it makes sense to have a kind of eye on your local community and, what a difference you can make there.
Yeah, well, as you say, to give back, and like we've a lot of people are interested in volunteering as well. And we ran a survey, Phil, in September last year. So this is when we launched, just before we launched a Shut Up and Listen campaign with the 1,000 free beds. And, it's no huge surprises from the replies, the comments, the free text comments, huge insights. But basically, I think companies either move themselves or they'll be forced to move, because I think there's a whole brand risk around, particularly young, brands that tap into the sub-40s market, because our 86% of the people replied said, look, companies should do a lot more, and 72% said they'd only support brands that are socially, kind of politically, environmentally engaged. They would walk away. They'd make a decision based first on what that company is doing versus their product or service or price.
Yeah.
And I think, as you said, Phil, that kind of hardening in a very good way of people's views during COVID, I think that's a wave that's going to lash out once, kind of, hopefully, fingers crossed, COVID begins to continue to die down a little bit more.
Yeah.
And companies will either be prepared, they won't. If they're not prepared, some of them may find it a little bit late. So there's you'd like to think the old Carson stick approach of doing the right thing, but equally, I deeply feel if companies don't do the right thing, I think time may pass them by.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's been polarized in the sense. I don't know what your particular part of the sector and how that's doing in terms of staffing and the like, but certainly it's widely reported that within hospitality that there's a bit of a crisis going on at the moment. Yeah. So then you've got to ask yourself the questions. Okay, so what can we do to make sure that we can hold on to our people? And I think if you're presenting a purpose that is making a difference to something and actually backing that up, not just paying lip service to it, then I think people get on board with that. For not just from a perspective of people will want to come and stay with you, but people want to come and work for you as well, because they feel like they're doing something for the greater good and the like. And as long as they're then being looked after as humans in that process as well, then you think, well, if everybody could do that, then that gives us a wonderful foundation to work from. But if you're not doing it at the moment, then you're quickly going to find yourself right at the back of the queue.
Yeah. I completely agree with that point. And it's so hard to get staff at the moment. But I think what in, say, people we've recruited recently, I think one of the comments I've heard over and over again is, we like what you're doing, and then it's into the job, right? So it's right. Kind of, we like what you stand for, and then, okay, let's talk about the role and is there a fit? And I think it's, it gives back, I guess. If you're doing the right thing, it gives back. And I suppose sometimes people feel, oh my God, the pressure, and we're being asked, and there's different pressures above, be it shareholders or whatever, but it's the small steps. It doesn't have to be transformational. It's just, if every company actually decides to stand up and do something meaningful, all those little pieces actually begin to drive some real meaningful change. Yeah,
well, it's that old kind of philosophy of make a 1% change consistently, and and then in 100 days' time, look back at what you've actually been able to achieve. That 1% gain can be compounded massively. I think that came from Dave Brailsford, wasn't it?
It was. I wasn't sure whether I'd still mention that.
I know. Well, that's right. Yeah. We don't know what goes on behind the scenes, but the principle of what he was saying made sense.
No, exactly. Well, the marginal gains, isn't it? That's what you're saying. Like you tweak and improve, and then you don't notice the improvement. Then you look back and you realize, wow,
yeah, but there's got to be a willingness to get started at least. And not just retreat into the old. Oh, well, that worked last year, so let's just keep doing it that way.
Yeah, and I think when you mention that phrase, kind of retreating back into the normal or work, it's kind of after being through COVID, one of the things I think about is, look, we all have to look in hospitality for silver linings. They're bloody hard to see. But it's kind of, can something good come out of this? And it can, and I think obviously we all, I feel, care more deeply about each other because we're not bloody busy, or we know what's important now, what isn't important. And you love to think there's a spark there for the companies to actually maybe start those marginal gains and to not forget and not to go back into autopilot.
Yeah, which is very easy to do, because that is the easy option, isn't it? Because everybody's chomping at the bit to get back to normality in inverted commas and just get trading again, and get some buzz back in the business, and all of these things, which, for all intents and purposes, and I'm touching wood here, that's happening now. Numbers are, and this is business numbers, are on the up, not COVID numbers, although maybe they are too. I'm not going to talk about that. But everything feels like it's moving in the right direction. So that's great. So that's the baseline now, where people should go, if they haven't already. Okay, so we're back to being busy, right? How are we really going to make a difference?
Yeah. I think it's, some said don't waste a crisis, or what's the phrase, but
that's right. Yeah,
this is a much bigger level, but I'd love to think just companies maybe self-reflect a little bit more.
Yeah.
And in fairness, I'm beginning to see some more things happening across all industries. I think people are just more conscious, and I think certainly for younger people, older people in particular, it's what else can we give people a boost up? How can we help them? And for younger people, if they want to volunteer around Europe, do 10 or 12 hostels come together and say, look, you have a free bed to stay in whichever city you're volunteering in. Simple things like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's, from a cost perspective, doesn't cost that much, does it? In the great scheme of things, but can make a big difference.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I'm interested to kind of understand, because you have a diverse background. You have worked across, if I've got this correctly, through legal, audit and finance, investment, service providers, pharma, and then now, of course, hospitality as well. Do you think all roads led here, or is this something that that kind of crossed your path and you went, you know what, I need to do this?
I think it's, to be honest, Phil, it's the latter. I know a lot of older employers will say young people move around quite a bit between jobs, and I guess I was one of those early millennials, kind of getting the itch every 4 or 5 years. But no, it's the latter, where I think this just kind of opened up, and there was an opportunity potentially, and it just seemed all, kind of one of those times in your life everything just seems to stack up, and you say, why not? Because I guess as a career in, people raise eyebrows at me, geez, Mark, that's a change. We don't know hostels, and a bit like how you opened up, everyone has two experiences. Sometimes it's the worst experience. And there's a bit of education with people, which is a shame, because the hostel sector is a brilliant sector to be in. But it just kind of felt right. And, I think life's for living as well, and you can't be looking at the ladder the whole time and going up, but if the passion isn't there, the fire isn't there. And I think that all formed part of the decision. And I suppose, being honest as well, it's a very exciting sector. People are brilliant, you get to meet your guests, it's fresh, it's kind of, there's kind of great energy. And I think also it's a sector that's going places, I firmly believe. And I think it's really just at the start, because I think, like, if you look at the hotel sector, for example, so some of the big brands, the Hilton, etc., be it whatever ownership format they have 5,000 hotels. The biggest in the hostel sector is sub 40 locations. So that's the biggest, and Kingston the top 10, but we've kind of 5 hostels now. Some of them are very big ones, but we're in top 10 in Europe. So it's so I think there's, and I think there's a really exciting road here in the hostel segment, and I think particularly if hostels can hold on to what made them kind of special, and not to become corporate. I don't mean that in a negative way, but from a hostel point of view, I think they'd lose a huge amount of what originally brought people in. Just relaxed. Staff lovely, everyone's chatting, and I should say the serendipity of life. You sit down, you get chatting to someone because it's all relaxed, and suddenly, you're kind of off traveling with them for 2 weeks, which is kind of what I did when I was interrailing, when the planes were too expensive. I hopped on a train, didn't know where we're going half the time, and you met people on the way, and so I think that's a wonderful experience for people to have. Which I think doesn't happen as often.
Yeah, and you're facilitators of that life learning then, aren't you? Because the skills that you gain by going away and doing something like that, I don't think you can ever put a price on it. You certainly can't go learn it in a classroom, and so you're being the facilitators of growth basically. There you go. You can put that in your marketing plan now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we kind of like to say we set the scene for travel stories.
Yeah.
By bringing people and places together, and so we kind of do. We're the backdrop. You're up, and we're the stage, and whatever happens on there happens. But we're trying to make sure people get to that stage and hopefully get to meet people. But yeah. And I think that's what makes so many hostels so different, say, to hotels. Hotels are great, but it's a different offering. It's a different focus.
Yep.
And I think it's that rawness of what hostels can do, and you don't know what's really ahead of you, is
right.
kind of half the beauty. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. What keeps it rich and interesting, from a learning perspective, I'm sure. We spoke about as well before around the fact that we talked about guest experience, because you're still giving your guest an experience. You're giving them a very different experience that you actually probably can't go out and get in a hotel. So it's you absolutely fundamentally have your place, and the fact that you guys are in the top 10 in Europe, and you're actually, in the great scheme of things, quite a small company from the outside looking in, is quite remarkable. I know where my investment's going in the in the future.
No, and it's something we're obviously we're precious about how we try to look after our guests, but always remain focused. And we have, to use a bit of corporate jargon for a second, we kind of have these growth pillars, and guest is one of those, and our people's another. So all the big stuff, and we plan our business around those pillars. So there's 4 or 5 things you say, look, forget everything else. You don't get these 4 or 5 things right, and that drives a lot of our focus. And like we would also have, people are surprised that we use NPS, for example. They think it only belongs to big corporates, but no, the NPS is a much better rating indicator than a rating on Booking.com or an OTA platform, because it tells you exactly where it's at.
Right.
And we feed that feedback. We do guest experience sessions with the teams, and we kind of hire for, it sounds a bit cheesy, but you hire for attitude. You want the personality, and then you can train people up. Obviously, you need a mix of both.
Yeah.
And I think all that's kind of paid and resulted in, Hostel World did a survey, I think it was the end of last year, Phil, and it was basically went out to, I think, 30,000 kind of registered members, and they said, simple question, which hostel would you most love to stay in when COVID finishes? And our Kink Nord, our Amsterdam hostel, got rated #1.
Right.
That was globally, and that was by guests versus any panel and such that goes with that. So, and we've got rated top. We had the top 3 best hostels for solo travelers and couples in Amsterdam. We won first, second, third. So,
right,
we're a smallish company, as you say, but big engine.
Yeah.
The family have done a great job building the business, and I guess the more management, including myself, have come in the last 3-4 years just to bring it to next level and kind of scale it. And it's wonderful when, look, an award's award, I never do hung up on it, but it's wonderful when you hear these great comments back from guests and the amazement of, wow, I didn't know a place like this existed, and the price and everything. So the guests are, I think, because you don't have a global brand, you have to fight more. So, and it's important, as I say, if guests aren't happy, we're not happy. That's a major issue. It's something we wouldn't put up with. And as I say, we try to design our buildings around the guests as much as possible, what they want, and keep on innovating. Yeah.
Well, I think if you're not considering your guest in the overall thing, then ultimately that's just not going to work, is it? So what would be the point?
Yes.
Yeah. No, very, very, very interesting. Are the founders still involved?
Yeah, no, the founders still involved. They kind of support aspects of the business that kind of be strategic. They've obviously a wealth of experience. They've been, kind of first hostel was around 1997, I think it was. So it's kind of huge amount of experience. So they're still involved, but the management run the day to day, and the family would support also. It's a combination that works well.
Yeah, I read the kind of story of how it came about on your website, and it's really quite lovely.
Yeah, and and I suppose that's where a lot of the passion comes from. Why the guest matters, why our brand matters, why we want to do well, But at the end of the day, you could take a view. Well, look, there's not a lot of hostels, and if you build something, they will come, type of thing, and it doesn't really matter how you treat the guests. And to a certain degree, because there's a lack of hostel numbers, that probably is valid short term anyway.
Yeah.
But it's very much, no, we want to provide the best that we can. We want to, for example, our Dublin hostel, Phil, it's the same build as a 2-star hotel, and probably a little bit higher in cost.
Right.
Every room with air conditioning, every room is en suite except for the very big dorms. The double rooms are very nice double rooms. They're spec'd out to quite a high standard. There's event space, social space. There's canteen for people who are in real budget or prefer to cook themselves.
Yeah.
There's a commercial kitchen. It kind of has everything, but it's a high spec building. It isn't something that you're cutting corners on. How you insulate the walls and the floors is very important, because you want people to have a good night's sleep. We're introducing sleeping pods, which is relatively new in the market. Some companies have done it, but we've looked at what's out there and said, how can we make it twice as good?
Right.
But we want to keep, budget. A pod bed, it originates, I guess, from Japan, and it's all about, some people say, look, dorms are great, they're cheap, but they're very noisy. And I actually stayed in one in my last trip to London as part of research, and it's as you do every trip. And yeah, it was pretty noisy, so you get 4 or 5 hours kip. But here, the pods we've designed, they're insulated, they have an air cooling system going through them, but they're at a good price. They're not at a crazy price. So we don't forget what a guest wants, and obviously cost is a factor, but it's trying to keep on upping the quality.
Yeah. Well, I think this is the thing, isn't it, about the perception of, the old perception, I should say. It's definitely not the perception now around the cost element of how much this is actually costing. Like, if I go back again to my Carlisle experience, I have no idea what we paid, but I don't think it was a lot of money. And it also felt like it was almost, well, if they're not paying any money, then let's give them the worst experience possible. That's kind of what it the experience that you end up having. But the two shouldn't correlate at all. People are still parting with their hard-earned cash. It doesn't matter whether it's a fiver or £5,000. There's still a transaction that's taking place. There should be some service in that, at least.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think that's probably, if you step back from it all, going back to that example Phil I gave in the 80s, where there wasn't a hotel budget sector, really. It's that kind of, I hate to say the word, but I'll use a professionalization. I don't mean in how people run hostels, but it's more, you're going to see some bigger brands or bigger groups come in. That's what I mean, because all the hostels out there are really good and run with such passion, but it's just I think 7-10 years ago, most of our guests would have been backpackers. Now they're about the third biggest group of our segment of people.
Right.
You'd have solo travelers are the biggest by far, and you'd have couples or mates who go on a weekend. So that's kind of changed quite a lot. And I think whether the industry likes it or not, that wider group of people want a certain standard. And as you said, they want everything, in a good way. They want the cheaper price, the good location, the great staff, a bit of crack and good events, and somewhere that's reasonably comfortable to sleep, and facilities that are clean and functional. So, and I think it's exciting times, but the sector is moving quickly. And I think the more it moves, I think you'll have this, as mentioned earlier, this new, sector opening up with the ultra budget, because I think Airbnb is being kind of, I find it harder to trade in certain cities. Say, go back to my hometown of Dublin, there's now restrictions passed that will make Airbnb accommodation incredibly difficult, because you need to be licensed now to rent out. So that's going to take a lot of short-term rental that was much cheaper than a hotel out of the market. And actually, I think that makes it much more important for hostels to kind of come in that vacuum.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, you're ready, right? That's the thing. You can fill that space right now.
Yeah. Yeah, we just need a few more quid behind us. So
yeah. Well, as I've already said, I'm investing, so there we are.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. How deep your pockets will take.
Yeah, not that deep. I'm afraid.
Yeah.
COVID, etc. But
yeah.
But no, that's great. I really, really interesting. And obviously, you're clearly not sitting on your hands, because you've got further properties being developed. And I mentioned including in Lisbon. Everyone I know seems to be building something in Lisbon. What's going on in Lisbon?
I think Lisbon as a city, I think up to 7-10 years ago, was kind of for some reason missed off the big kind of destination cities. And it's a beautiful city.
It's
anyone have been, and
one of my favorite places in the world.
Yeah. And it's kind of slightly, not decade's wrong word, but it's not squeaky crystal clean. It has character in that sense, in a very good way.
Yeah.
And the people are lovely, and it's very cheap. Geez, I remember being there and I was kind of struggling to spend money, like a coffee is £1.20. I think it was the most expensive. I didn't go to Starbucks, but so I think that's one of the reasons. Also, I think you've had a lot of people retire out there, because I think it's, I believe, for pensions, it's very tax efficient, stuff like that.
Right.
But I just, the bigger thing, I think it's come on people's radar screen a lot more, and more airlines are flying in. And then Porto as well is a city that's kind of gone through huge growth. And it's a bit like, I think Lisbon's a bit like Dublin, as in there's very few similarities, except for the next point. Obviously, it's Dublin doesn't quite have the sunshine, etc. But
I'll give it 100 years, and it'll.
Yeah. 100 years. Well, it could be underwater as well. But it's like Dublin up to 10, 12 years ago wasn't seen as an international destination city for the big hotel group. So I think that's...
Is that right?
Yeah. It's only in the last 10, 12 years that it's always been an important city, but it hasn't been up there with, Paris and London are the top 10 in Europe. And I think it's now made up there. And I think Lisbon has gone there too. But I think Lisbon's just a great city, and people, for whatever reason, I think they used to go to the Algarve a lot, but not into the city. Yeah. As much, and then they realize, wow, it's a brilliant place.
Yeah, I when in the early part of my career, I worked on cruise ships, and we were in and out of Lisbon all the time. And just one of the underrated cities that I've ever been to. I just always had a wonderful time there. So I'm not surprised that the world has cottoned onto it. It feels like it's taken them forever to get there.
But, it has. Yeah. It's brutally slow.
Yeah, which I suppose has been good for the times that being able to go there while it's not been overdeveloped. And but yeah, everybody wants a piece of the popular pie.
Yes, indeed. But I suppose there's lots of other great cities out there as well. And I think that going back to that budget theme, Bill, like if you're kind of Paris, London, for us, you can stay in London for 22-25 quid a night. Now it'll be
that's incredible.
A dorm room, but it'll have an ensuite, and we're kind of close to finishing a kind of refurbishment of our London hostel, which will take it from first division or championship into the Premiership. Right. We would feel and have all the rooms have air conditioning, which is reasonably unique in hostels in London, because a lot of buildings are old, the cost of it, etc. And so, but exactly, if 22-25 quid a night, and you get a breakfast for £253, continental breakfast, there's huge amounts, and then you've all the social stuff that comes after it. So and it's about us opening up cities to more people that can't afford. Yeah.
So is that kind of the plan, as it were? I mean, obviously there's probably some nuance to that, but is it to, because you are onto something in terms of the product that you offer. It works. People like it. Is it now to go, right, okay, what other cities need us?
Yeah, it's again, honest view, pre-COVID, it was kind of growing to 11 to 12 hostels, and we have our 5 that are open, and Dublin, Lisbon would have brought us up to 7, and then I was looking to go. I suppose with COVID, it's kind of everyone's had to pause a little bit. We've kept very busy with Dublin and London refurbishment, but we would like to take it further. Absolutely. I think the kind of economics returns in normal times are extremely good. And I think it's just, we're probably pausing until kind of COVID continues to wind itself out a little bit more. But we'd love to be able to grow and be in, every cultural capital city in Europe, and there's nothing to stop this from the US. US is a kind of huge market. Hostel is a dirty word over there, but I have to say, geez, well, you kind of, it's just people think of the wrong thing, I think, is probably the polite way of putting it. But you have the whole motel kind of lifestyle, and having stayed in kind of when I was in another job career, good 3-star hotel, but they're soulless places. So it's kind of huge opportunity there. Then Asia. So this is something that, if the budget space is kind of 15-20% of all hotels now, then the ultra budget space, there's no reason it can't be that size, which makes it a phenomenal international market. So you have companies like Selena do a really good job in growing a kind of European America's brand and trying to promote. But I suppose with all things, it takes a good few quid to grow. But but there's a lot of investment money that would love to get into the space. Including yours.
Yeah, of course. My £25. Yes.
I can buy you a pillow for that. So
excellent. That's fine. Brilliant. I find it very interesting because you definitely don't, as I said at the top of the show, you don't have the typical kind of route here, but actually, you've learned a huge number of skills in many different sectors across your career to this point. And I don't doubt for a second that makes you a much better CEO for it, because you've got all this, a variety of experience coming your way. And it also pleases me because it's kind of proof again that you can come to this industry at any stage. It's not just about the normal career path of start at the bottom and work your way up. It's if you've got an itch to scratch and you feel that hospitality can do that, then come on in at any kind of level, and you're another shining example of that.
And look, and I think exactly it's and if we go back to COVID, I think what's one of the headlines I saw recently was the Great Resignation, they're calling it, where people sitting at home, people wondering about life and everything. And apparently, if you can believe the research, 40% of all employees will be looking to move in the next 12 months. Now, whether with further lockdown and ease, that number reduces. But I suppose the point I'm making is life's short. You have to get in and do something you like. And if it means jumping sector, now I've done it 4 times. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that number, but it's but the skills you pick up, you bring a different perspective. And I think for us, diversity is really important. Diversity and inclusion, in who we hire. And again, that's part of the B Corporation. But it's kind of having different views around the table, not from the industry, I think is massive. I can bring a different perspective from a different sector. It may be a lot of rubbish, or it may actually be insightful. And I found, those skills, I think you touched on, you pick them up as you go different sectors. And it's I like to think, people often think, oh, well, I'm back to scratch if I move into another sector, or I'd love hospitality, but I don't know much about it. It's just people have a lot to offer from different sectors. I'd say more in some ways than hospitality if you don't have that diversity in the management team.
So an absolutely bang on point as well. How can you ever hope to change if you don't take some change of viewpoints? And that doesn't have to come from within hospitality. It's not just about bringing somebody in from the sector, from a different role within. I mean, why shouldn't we go out to other sectors to get that different? At the end of the day, we're all consumers of hospitality.
Exactly.
At any level. Whether you're paying 500 quid for a 3 Michelin starred experience in a restaurant, or a 3 courses for 20 quid at your local pub
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, they're all, we all know what we like.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, bring that expertise of your knowledge as a consumer to the table.
Yeah. And it's just to be a little bit brave as well. As I say, life's short and people aren't enjoying their industry or where they are. It's obviously to think carefully about it. You don't want to be looking back in 5-10 years time saying, geez, I wish I did that. And so I think that's important too.
Yeah, absolutely. So conscious of time, I shall let you go soon. But what would you say to somebody who was considering a career within hospitality and actually specifically within your sector, within the sector?
I'd say hostels. It's kind of I think a huge opportunity for people to get in. You're kind of dealing with young people all the time, which makes it's kind of high energy. It's good fun. We don't take ourselves too seriously, and I think that's very nice. And some businesses are a little bit too corporate-y. I think it's probably applies to all companies. Kind of obviously make sure your company's trying to stand for something, albeit it could be at the start of the journey on it. But there's cracking opportunities, and the hostels are only going one way. So I think there'd be big kind of scope over the years for people to develop careers, to help grow hostels, and just travel and hang around very nice people. So I think there's big positives. It's a great sector, super sector.
Fantastic. Where can I apply? I'll have a coffee with you one day.
Exactly.
No, that's great. I massively appreciate you making time to come on the show and tell us your story, and also give us a hell of a lot more insight into your world, really. And I wish you all the very best with the next phase. It sounds like it's going to be very, very exciting.
Yes, it is. And thank you so much, Phil, for having me. Look, a real pleasure. And thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure. Excellent.
Okay, great.
Take care. I'll speak to you soon.
Okay. Talk soon. Thanks, Phil. Thank you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
And there we have it. What an excellent journey Mark has had, and I'm right behind Clink in their ethos of making a difference to the world, and wish Mark and the team huge success in their pursuit of Bcorp accreditation. We'll be back next Wednesday with more stories from hospitality, but until then, don't forget to like, review and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.